She crawled through the snow, leaving blood behind her. 11 years old. A brand burned into her shoulder like she was cattle. When Eli Hawkins found her at his fence line that February night, she looked up at him and whispered 5 words that broke something inside him. "Am I real, mister?" He'd buried his own daughter 3 years ago. He'd sworn never to care again. But when the most powerful man in Bitter Creek came demanding this child back, Eli made a choice that would cost him everything. Subscribe now and follow this story to the end. Comment your city below. Let me see how far this tale travels. The blood trail stretched 30 yards through the snow. Eli Hawkins saw it first in the fading light, dark against white, and his hand went to the rifle on his saddle before his mind caught up. Coyote kill, maybe. Wounded deer. But the pattern was wrong. Too straight. Too deliberate. He dismounted and followed it. February in Wyoming Territory didn't forgive much. Temperature sat around 15 below, maybe colder. The kind of cold that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground. Eli had been checking his fence line one last time before full dark, same as he did every evening, same routine he'd kept for 3 years, since there'd been nobody waiting for him at the cabin anyway. The blood led to his property line. That's when he saw her. A child. Small, maybe 11 years old, crawling on hands and knees through the snow. She was dragging something wrapped in oilskin, her fingers locked around it so tight the knuckles had gone white. Her coat was torn clean through at the shoulder, and underneath Eli's breath caught. The girl reached his fence post and looked up. Her face was purple and white frostbite, claiming the edges of her nose and cheeks. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. But her eyes, those eyes were alive, terrified and alive. "Am I real, mister?" she whispered. "I ain't real without the paper." "Am I real?" Eli knelt in the snow. "You're real." "You sure?" "I'm sure." She stared at him a long moment. Then her eyes rolled back and she collapsed. Eli caught her before she hit the ground. She weighed nothing, just bones and fear wrapped in torn fabric. When he lifted her, he saw what had been done to her shoulder blade. A brand. The letter M burned deep into her flesh. Same way a man would mark his cattle. The smell of burnt skin still clung to her even under the cold. For a moment, Eli couldn't move. 3 years ago, he'd carried his own daughter like this. Sarah had weighed nothing either by the end. Fever had eaten her down to nothing, and he'd ridden 40 miles through a storm to fetch a doctor who'd arrived too late. This girl was still breathing. He carried her toward the cabin. Behind him in the trees, a lantern bobbed. Someone was coming. Eli moved faster. Chud! The cabin door slammed behind him, and he set the girl by the fire. She didn't let go of that oilskin pouch, not even unconscious. Her fingers stayed locked around it like it was the only proof she'd ever lived. Eli grabbed the kettle off the hook, poured warm water into a tin cup. Not hot would shock her system. Just warm enough to remind her blood it had work to do. The coat he wrapped around her had been Sarah's. He'd kept it 3 years. Couldn't bring himself to throw it away, couldn't bear to give it to charity. The wool still smelled faintly of lavender soap, the kind his wife Mary had made before the fever took her too, 6 months after Sarah. The girl's eyes fluttered open. She saw the fire first, stared at it like it was the first true thing she'd seen in a long time. Then her gaze moved to Eli, to the rifle against the wall, back to Eli. "Can you drink?" he asked. She nodded. He held the cup to her lips. Her hands shook too bad to manage it herself. She took 3 small sips, then turned her head away. Eli set the cup down, fed another log to the fire. "You're safe here," he said. "Nobody's gonna hurt you." She didn't believe him. He could see that plain enough. But she was too tired to run, so she just sat there, clutching that pouch like a rosary. 3 knocks on the door. Hard, impatient. "Eli Hawkins, open this door." The girl's whole body went rigid. Her eyes got wide, and her breath came fast and shallow, the kind of breathing that says the body's about done fighting. Eli picked up the rifle. "Stay by the fire," he told her. He crossed to the door and opened it just wide enough to see out. Judge Cornelius Mercer stood on the other side. He was a tall man, 60 or so, dressed fine, even out here in the snow. Black coat lined with beaver fur, polished boots, a Bible tucked under one arm, like he'd just come from preaching. Behind him, 2 men held lanterns, their faces hard and patient. "That's my niece you got in there," Mercer said. His voice was smooth, reasonable, the voice of a man used to being obeyed. "That's a child," Eli said. "And she's hurt. She's a runaway. I'm her legal guardian." Mercer pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Got the judge's signature right here. Course I am the judge, so that simplified matters." He smiled. Eli didn't. "She's got a brand on her shoulder," Eli said. "Letter M, same as you use on your cattle." Mercer's smile didn't waver. "The child needed discipline. She's wild, Eli. Runs off, lies, steals. Her father spoiled her something terrible before his unfortunate accident. I'm simply trying to correct his mistakes. By burning her. By teaching her she belongs somewhere. That she has a place." Mercer stepped closer, lowering his voice like they were old friends sharing confidences. "I know you understand, Eli. You lost your Sarah. Terrible thing losing a child. This girl, Grace is her name. She's all I have left of my sister's bloodline. I'm trying to save her. From what? From herself." Eli looked at the paper in Mercer's hand. Legal and proper, no doubt. Signed and witnessed. The law was on Mercer's side. The law was always on the side of men with money. "Bring her out," Mercer said. "I'll take her home, get her warm, feed her a proper meal. This doesn't have to be difficult." Behind Eli, he heard a small sound. A whimper. He turned. The girl Grace was standing now, pressed against the far wall, her eyes fixed on Mercer. She was shaking so hard, her teeth chattered. "Please," she whispered. "Please, mister, don't let him take me." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Grace, come here. Now." She shook her head. "Grace?" "He killed my daddy," she said. Her voice was small but steady. "Made it look like an accident. The windmill. He cut the rope so it would fall. I saw him." Mercer laughed, short, sharp, dismissive. "The child has a vivid imagination. Samuel died in a tragic accident. Everyone in town knows that. The coroner ruled—" "I saw you," Grace said again. "I was in the barn. You didn't know I was watching." The cabin went quiet. Eli looked at Mercer, looked at the way his smile had frozen, the way his hands had gone still at his sides. "She's lying," Mercer said. "She's a disturbed child. She needs help that you can't provide." "Maybe so." Eli raised the rifle, not pointing it at anyone, just holding it casual across his chest. "But she ain't leaving tonight." "You're making a mistake, Hawkins." "Wouldn't be my first." Mercer's eyes went cold. The smooth, reasonable voice dropped away, and underneath was something harder. Something that had burned a child like livestock. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said. "With the marshal, with proper authority. And when I come back, I'll take what's mine, and I'll remember that you stood in my way." "You do that." "I own the note on this property, Hawkins. $280 due in April. You default, and this land goes to my bank. Then what? Where will you go? Where will she go?" Eli didn't answer. Mercer smiled again, thin and cold. "Think about it. One night to consider your options. One night to decide if a stranger's child is worth losing everything you have left." He turned and walked back into the darkness. The lanterns followed. The sound of boots crunching through snow faded until there was nothing but the wind. Eli shut the door. When he turned around, Grace was still pressed against the wall, still clutching that oilskin pouch. "He'll come back," she said. "I know. He always comes back." Eli set the rifle down, crossed to the fire, sat in the chair where he could see both the door and the girl. "Then we'd best be ready," he said. Grace looked at him a long moment. Then slowly she came away from the wall, sat on the floor by the fire close to him, but not too close. Like a wild animal that wants warmth, but doesn't trust the hand that offers it. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why are you helping me? You don't know me." Eli stared into the flames. 3 years of silence. 3 years of getting up alone, working alone, eating alone, going to bed alone. 3 years of pretending that was enough. "I had a daughter," he said. "She died." "I'm sorry." "So am I." He looked at her. "I couldn't save her. Wasn't fast enough, wasn't strong enough. By the time I got help, it was too late." Grace was quiet. "You showed up at my fence line half dead," Eli continued. "You asked me if you were real, and I thought—" He stopped, swallowed. "I thought maybe God was giving me another chance. A chance to save somebody. To not be too late this time." Grace's eyes filled with tears. She didn't cry, though. Eli got the sense she'd learned not to cry a long time ago. "He's going to take everything from you," she said. "Your ranch, your horses, everything." "Probably." "Then why—" Eli reached out and put his hand on her shoulder, gentle, the way he used to touch Sarah when she'd had a nightmare. "Because some things matter more than land," he said. "Some things matter more than property. And a child, any child, ain't something you trade away to keep what you got." Grace stared at him. Then she opened the oilskin pouch and pulled out a folded paper yellowed and creased. "My daddy's will," she said. "It says I inherit everything when I turn 12. The ranch, the cattle, the water rights. Everything. Uncle Cornelius needs it gone before then. That's why he wants me back." Eli took the paper, read it carefully. Samuel Thornton's handwriting was clear and precise. 400 acres. 350 head of cattle. Water rights to Bitter Creek. All held in trust until Grace reached age 12, then transferred to her free and clear. "When's your birthday?" Eli asked. "July." "That's 5 months." "I know." Grace took the paper back, folded it carefully, tucked it into the pouch. "If I'm gone before then he gets everything. And if I'm dead—" She stopped. Eli felt something cold settle in his chest. Colder than the February wind. Colder than the snow. "He wouldn't," Eli said. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. A man who would brand a child, who would murder his own brother-in-law, that man would do anything. "He told me," Grace said quietly. "He said I was more trouble than I was worth. Said there were easier ways to settle an inheritance than waiting for me to grow up." "When did he say that?" "The night I ran." Eli stood, walked to the window. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, thick and white, covering the blood trail, covering the tracks, covering everything. "You should have told me earlier," he said. "Would it have changed anything?" He thought about it. Thought about Mercer standing on his doorstep, smooth and reasonable, talking about discipline and correction and legal guardianship. Thought about that brand on her shoulder, still angry and red. "No," he said. "It wouldn't have." He turned back to her. "You're staying here. I don't care what papers he's got. I don't care what laws he claims. You're staying until July, until you turn 12, until that inheritance is yours, and nobody can touch it. But your ranch is wood and nails. You're a child." He knelt so they were eye level. "You understand me. I made my choice the second I picked you up out of that snow. Everything else, the money, the land, whatever he tries to take, that's just noise. You're what matters." Grace's lip trembled. For a moment, Eli thought she might cry. Instead, she threw her arms around his neck and held on tight. She smelled like blood and cold and fear. Her small body shook against his. And Eli held her the way he'd held Sarah during thunderstorms, the way he'd held Mary when the doctor said there was nothing more to be done. "Thank you," Grace whispered. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Eli said. "We've got a long way to go." But even as he said it, he felt something shift inside him. Something that had been dead for 3 years, starting to breathe again. Outside, the storm raged on. Tomorrow, Mercer would come back with the law, with threats, with all the power of money and position and righteous certainty. But tonight, there was warmth. There was shelter. There was a child who needed him. And Eli Hawkins, who had buried his daughter and his wife, and his hope found that he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Not anymore. The fire burned low before Grace finally spoke again.
Mr. Hawkins, Eli, just Eli. Eli.
She tested the name carefully like she wasn't sure she had permission to use it. What happens when the marshal comes? Don't know yet. Will you fight them? Eli considered the question. He'd been a Texas Ranger once years ago. He knew how to fight. But he also knew that fighting the law rarely ended well, even when the law was wrong. I'll do what needs doing, he said, but I'm hoping it won't come to that. Why not? Because bullets don't solve problems. They just create new ones. He shifted in his chair. Mercer's got the law on his side right now. Papers, signatures, official stamps. But the law ain't the only thing that matters in a town like Bitter Creek. What else matters? People. What they think. What they believe. Eli looked at her. You said you saw Mercer cut that rope. You said you watched him murder your father. Grace nodded, her face going pale. That's testimony. Real testimony from a real witness. And there are people in town, good people who might listen, who might ask questions Mercer don't want answered. Like who? Doc Prescott. He's the one who examined your father after the accident. He might have seen things that didn't add up. Eli paused. And there's Abigail Foster. Runs the general store and the post office. She knows everything that happens in Bitter Creek, and she's not afraid of Mercer. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, My daddy trusted her. Mrs. Foster, I mean. He used to say she was the only honest person in town. He was probably right. Do you think she'll help us? I think she'll want to hear your story, and once she hears it... Eli shrugged. Abby Foster's got a temper like a rattlesnake when she thinks someone's being done wrong. Grace almost smiled. Almost. The expression flickered across her face and then disappeared like she'd forgotten how to hold on to it. I'm tired, she said. I know you are. Eli stood and pulled a blanket from the shelf, shook it out and carried it to the corner where he kept a spare bedroll. You sleep there tonight, he said. I'll be right here by the fire if you need anything. Grace didn't move at first. She sat clutching the oilskin pouch, staring at the bedroll like it might be a trap. It's safe, Eli said. I promise. She looked at him, looked at the blanket, looked at the door. He used to lock me in the root cellar, she said quietly, when he was angry, sometimes for days. Eli's hands tightened on the blanket. No cellars here, he said. No locks. You can leave that door anytime you want. I won't stop you. Why not? Because you're not a prisoner. You're a guest, and guests can come and go as they please. Grace considered this. Then slowly she rose from the floor, walked to the bedroll, lay down with the oilskin pouch clutched to her chest. Eli spread the blanket over her. What if I have nightmares? She asked. Then I'll be right here. You won't leave. I won't leave. She closed her eyes. For a long time her breathing stayed quick and shallow, and Eli could tell she wasn't sleeping, just waiting. Waiting for the door to burst open. Waiting for hands to drag her back into the darkness. He sat in his chair and didn't move, didn't make a sound. Just let her feel his presence steady and unchanging, until finally her breathing slowed, and her grip on the pouch loosened, and she slept. Eli watched her sleep. She looked younger when the fear wasn't in her face, younger and smaller and desperately fragile. The bruises on her neck had started to turn yellow at the edges. The brand on her shoulder would scar. She would carry that mark for the rest of her life. But she was alive. And tomorrow, when Mercer came back with his marshal and his papers and his righteous certainty, Eli would be ready. He didn't know how yet. Didn't have a plan. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let her go. He'd failed Sarah, failed Mary, failed everyone he'd ever loved. But this time, this one time, he was going to fight until there was nothing left to fight with. The wind howled outside. Snow piled against the windows. The fire cracked and popped, sending sparks up the chimney. And Eli Hawkins alone, with a sleeping child and a coming storm, sat in the darkness and waited for morning. Morning came gray and cold. Grace woke with a gasp, her hand flying to the oilskin pouch before her eyes even opened. When she saw Eli still sitting in the chair by the fire, she let out a breath she'd been holding. "You stayed," she said. "Told you I would." She sat up slowly, wincing. The brand on her shoulder had stiffened overnight, the burned flesh pulling tight against the cold. Eli saw her reach for it, saw the way her fingers stopped just short of touching it. "Doc Prescott needs to look at that," he said. "Make sure it don't get infected." "No." Grace shook her head hard. "No doctors, no town. He'll find me. He already knows where you are. But if I stay hidden, you can't stay hidden forever." Eli stood and crossed to the stove, started building a fire for coffee. "And hiding ain't gonna solve nothing. Mercer's got papers. He's got the law. The only way we beat him is if people see what he's done to you." Grace pulled Sarah's coat tighter around herself. "They won't believe me." "Why not?" "Because he's the judge. He's rich. He goes to church every Sunday and puts money in the collection plate." Her voice went bitter. "Who's gonna believe a little girl over him?" Eli poured water into the coffee pot, set it on the stove. "I believe you," he said. Grace looked up at him. "That's one," Eli continued. "Doc Prescott will believe you when he sees that brand. That's two. Abby Foster's been suspicious of Mercer for years. That's three." He turned to face her. "We don't need the whole town. We just need enough people asking the right questions. And if it's not enough, then we figure out the next thing." Grace was quiet. Then she asked, "What happened to your daughter, Sarah?" The name hit Eli like a fist to the chest. He hadn't said it out loud in 3 years. Hadn't let himself. "Scarlet fever," he said. "Started with a cough. By the 3rd day she couldn't keep water down. I rode 40 miles to fetch Doc Prescott, but by the time we got back..." He stopped. "She was already gone," Grace finished quietly. "Her mama died 6 months later. Fever took her too, though I always thought it was grief that really did it." Eli poured 2 cups of coffee, handed one to Grace. "After that I just stopped. Stopped talking to people. Stopped going to town. Stopped caring about much of anything." "But you cared about me." Eli looked at her. This small, fierce girl with her father's will clutched to her chest and a monster's brand on her shoulder. "Yeah," he said. "I did." The sound of hooves broke the moment. Eli was at the window before the second hoofbeat. 3 riders coming up the trail. He recognized the lead horse, a gray mare that belonged to Tom Bridger, the deputy marshal from Cheyenne. "They're here," Eli said. Grace went white. She scrambled to her feet, looking for somewhere to run, somewhere to hide. But the cabin was small, and there was nowhere to go. "Easy." Eli put a hand on her shoulder. "Stay behind me. Don't say nothing unless I tell you to. But trust me." She looked at him. Then she nodded. Eli picked up his rifle and opened the door. Tom Bridger dismounted first. He was younger than Eli remembered, maybe 35, with a federal badge pinned to his coat. Behind him came Mercer on his big black horse, and behind Mercer, a man Eli didn't recognize, heavy-set with small eyes and a shotgun across his saddle. "Eli Hawkins," Bridger said. His voice was formal, official. "I'm here on behalf of Judge Cornelius Mercer to retrieve a minor child unlawfully detained on these premises." "That's so." "I've seen the guardianship papers. They're legal and proper." Bridger paused. "I don't want trouble, Eli. Just hand over the girl and this ends peaceful." "You remember me, Tom?" Bridger blinked. Sir. Fort Griffin, 1871. You were a Green Ranger barely old enough to shave. I was your captain. Something flickered in Bridger's eyes. Recognition. Memory. Captain Hawkins, he said slowly. I didn't know. I mean, I heard you'd retired, but I didn't realize I taught you how to track. Taught you how to read a man's face when he's lying. Eli stepped forward. Look at that man behind you. Look at his face. Tell me what you see. Bridger hesitated. Then he turned and looked at Mercer. Mercer's smile was perfect. Calm. Reasonable. The smile of a man with nothing to hide. This is ridiculous, Mercer said. Marshal, I insist you carry out your duty. Look harder, Eli said. Look at his hands. Bridger looked. Mercer's hands were tight on his reins, knuckles white despite the easy smile. Now look at the girl. Grace had stepped out from behind Eli. She stood in the doorway, small and pale, Sarah's coat hanging loose on her thin shoulders. Show him, Eli said quietly. Grace reached up, pulled the collar of her dress aside. The brand was ugly in the morning light. Raw and red, the letter M burned deep into her flesh. Bridger's face went still. She fell, Mercer said quickly. Burned herself on the stove. I told you she's clumsy, she's always... That ain't a stove burn, Bridger said. His voice had changed. Gone hard. That's a branding iron. I've seen enough cattle marked to know the difference. She's lying. She did it to herself to get sympathy. The child is disturbed. I've told you. Show him the whip marks, Eli said. Grace turned around, lifted the back of her dress. Even Eli, who'd seen them before, felt his stomach turn. The scars crisscrossed her back like a map of pain. Some were old, faded to white. Others were newer, still pink and raised. And underneath them all, older bruises, yellow and green, layered like years of suffering. Bridger's hand went to his gun. Now, Eli said, you want to tell me again about legal and proper. Mercer's face had gone red. She's my ward. I have the right to discipline. Discipline. Bridger's voice cracked like a whip. You call this discipline? The law clearly states, to hell with what the law states. Bridger turned to face Mercer fully. I've got eyes, Judge. I've got a conscience. And I've got a report to file with the territorial governor. Mercer's smile finally cracked. Underneath was something ugly, something desperate. You're making a mistake, Marshal. A very serious mistake. Maybe. But I'd rather make a mistake than help a man who brands children. Bridger looked at Eli. I can't change the guardianship order. That's above my authority. But I can delay enforcement pending investigation. How long? A week, maybe 2. Bridger mounted his horse. That's the best I can do, Captain. Use it well. He rode past Mercer without another word. Mercer sat on his horse staring at Eli. The reasonable mask was gone now. What remained was rage pure and hot. You think this changes anything, he said. 1 week, 2 weeks. It doesn't matter. That girl belongs to me. Her land belongs to me. And when this is over... When this is over, Eli said, you'll be in prison or in the ground. I haven't decided which yet. Mercer's eyes went wide. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound with no humor in it. You're threatening a judge. I'm making a promise. They stared at each other. Mercer looked away first. He jerked his horse around and rode after Bridger, his hired man following close behind. Eli watched them go. When they were out of sight, he felt a small hand slip into his. He's going to kill you, Grace said quietly. He's gonna try. You should have let me go. You should have... No. Eli knelt down, looked her in the eyes. I don't run from men like Mercer. Never have. Never will. Why not? Because if I run, he wins. And if he wins, nobody's safe. Not you. Not the next child he decides belongs to him. Not anyone in this town who ever dared to question his authority. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I don't want you to die because of me. Then help me live. Eli squeezed her hand. We've got 1 week, maybe 2. That's time enough to find what we need to bury him. What do we need? Proof, witnesses, something that shows the whole town what kind of man he really is. Eli stood, and I know just where to start. They rode into town that afternoon. Grace didn't want to go. She sat rigid on the horse in front of Eli, her whole body trembling every time someone looked their way. But Eli kept his hand steady on her back and his voice calm in her ear. Doc Prescott first, he said, then Abby Foster, 1 step at a time. Doc Prescott's office was a narrow building wedged between the blacksmith and the feed store. The sign out front was faded, the paint peeling, but the windows were clean and the doorstep was swept. Eli dismounted and helped Grace down. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, but you're also brave. I saw that last night when you stood up to Mercer. He tipped her chin up. You can do this. She took a breath, nodded. They went inside. Doc Prescott was a lean man in his 40s, with gray in his beard and tired eyes. He'd been a field surgeon in the war. Eli knew that from the way he moved, quick and efficient, no wasted motion. He looked up from his desk when they came in. Eli Hawkins, it's been years. Doc. Heard you've been keeping to yourself out on that ranch. Prescott's eyes moved to Grace. And who's this? Grace Thornton, Samuel Thornton's daughter. Something shifted in Prescott's face. Samuel's girl I thought she was living with. She was. Eli put a hand on Grace's shoulder. Show him. Grace pulled down the collar of her dress. Prescott stood so fast his chair fell over. He crossed the room in 3 steps, his hands hovering over the brand, not quite touching. Good God, he breathed. Good God. There's more, Eli said. On her back. Grace turned, lifted her dress. Prescott made a sound, half gasp, half growl. He turned away, pressing his hand to his mouth. When he turned back, his eyes were wet. How long? He asked Grace. How long has this been going on? Since October. Since my daddy died. The accident. Grace's voice dropped to a whisper. It wasn't an accident. Prescott went very still. What are you saying? I saw him. Uncle Cornelius. He cut the rope on the windmill. He made it fall on my daddy. I was hiding in the barn. He didn't know I was watching. The silence stretched long and heavy. Then Prescott said, I examined your father's body. Grace nodded. The wounds were unusual. The angle of the impact. The position of the body. Prescott's voice had gone strange, distant, like he was thinking out loud. I noted it in my report, but Mercer assured me it was a tragic accident. He had witnesses who said Samuel was working alone. He paid them, Grace said. He pays everyone. Not everyone. Prescott walked to a cabinet, pulled out a leather case. I kept my notes, my photographs, the equipment that caused the injury. He looked at Eli. At the time, I thought I was just being thorough, but something never sat right with me. The way Mercer rushed the burial, the way he took the girl so fast. Can you testify? Eli asked. I can do more than that. Prescott opened the case, pulled out a sheaf of papers. I can prove the accident was staged. The rope was cut clean. I examined it myself. A frayed rope doesn't break that way. Someone used a knife. Eli felt something loosen in his chest. You kept the rope? I kept everything, locked in my safe. Prescott looked at Grace. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I thought I don't know what I thought. That I was imagining things. That a judge couldn't possibly... You're speaking now, Grace said quietly. That's what matters. Prescott knelt down to her level. I'm going to examine you properly. Document everything. Take photographs. Is that all right? Grace looked at Eli. I'll be right outside, he said. You're safe here." She nodded. Eli waited on the porch watching the street. Bitter Creek wasn't much a main road lined with false front buildings, a church at one end, a saloon at the other. Folks went about their business bundled against the cold, not paying him much mind. But he noticed the looks, the whispers. Word traveled fast in a small town. He wondered how many of them knew what Mercer was, how many had looked the other way. The door to the general store opened across the street, and Abigail Foster stepped out. She was a sturdy woman around 60 with gray hair pinned tight and eyes that missed nothing. She stood on her porch for a moment looking at Eli. Then she crossed the street, her boots crunching through the packed snow. "Eli Hawkins," she said. "Heard you're causing trouble." "Seems that way." "Also heard you've got Samuel Thornton's girl out at your place." Abby's eyes narrowed. "That true?" "She's with Doc Prescott right now, getting examined." "Examined for what?" Eli held her gaze. Mercer branded her Abby, like she was livestock, put an M right on her shoulder blade. Abby's face didn't change, but her hands curled into fists at her sides. "I knew it," she said quietly. "I knew something was wrong. That man's been acting strange since October, jumpy, secretive, going through his files at all hours." She paused. "I deliver bread to the land office every Wednesday. I see things." "What kind of things?" "Ledgers that don't balance. Papers he hides when I come in. Telegrams from Helena that he burns after reading." Abby stepped closer, lowered her voice. "I think he's in trouble, Eli. Financial trouble. The kind that makes a man desperate. Desperate enough to murder his brother-in-law." Abby's eyes went wide. "What are you saying?" Grace saw it. She was in the barn when Mercer cut the rope on Samuel's windmill. She watched her father die. For a moment, Abby didn't speak. Then she said, "That land, Samuel's land, it's worth $15,000, cattle grazing rights, water rights. All goes to Grace when she turns 12. July. July." Abby's jaw tightened. He needs the money before then, before whoever he owes comes collecting. "Can you find out who?" "I can try." She looked toward Doc Prescott's office. "That girl going to be all right?" "I'm going to make sure of it." Abby nodded slowly. "Samuel was a good man. He used to bring me honey from his hives every fall. Never asked for nothing in return." She met Eli's eyes. "You need help, you come to me. Whatever I got, it's yours." "Careful, Abby. Mercer's got your mortgage too." "Mercer can go to hell." She turned and walked back toward her store. At the door she paused. "You're a good man, Eli Hawkins. Samuel would have been grateful." She went inside. Eli stood alone on the street, feeling the weight of what was coming. 1 week, maybe 2. And then Mercer would be back with more men, more papers, more legal authority to take what he wanted. It wasn't enough time. It had to be enough. The door behind him opened. Doc Prescott stepped out, his face grim. "Well," Eli asked, "I've documented everything. Photographs, measurements, written descriptions. That brand is 2 weeks old, maybe 3. The whip marks go back months. There's scarring on her back that predates Samuel's death." Prescott paused. "This wasn't discipline, Eli. This was torture. Will it hold up in court?" "Depends on the court. If we can get this to a judge who isn't Mercer." Prescott shook his head. "But that's the problem, isn't it? He's the law here. He decides what's legal and what's not." "Not for long." "What are you planning?" Eli looked down the street toward the church. "You said you kept the rope from Samuel's accident, the one that was cut." "I did." "And your notes, your photographs of the body?" "Yes." "What about the coroner's report?" "I filed it with the territorial office in Cheyenne. Standard procedure." Prescott's eyes widened. "You think someone else has a copy?" "I think if Mercer forged guardianship papers, he might have forged other things too. And if we can prove the coroner's report was altered, then we can prove the accident was murder." And if we can prove murder, then nothing else matters. No guardianship order, no legal custody. He goes to prison and Grace goes free. Eli nodded. I need to get to Cheyenne. That's 100 miles. I know. In February, through the mountains. I know. Prescott was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'll come with you. No. I need you here, watching Grace, keeping her safe. She can stay with me. She stays with Abby. Eli turned toward the general store. Abby's got a shotgun and a mean temper. Mercer won't try anything with witnesses around. And if he does? Eli didn't answer. He walked across the street and pushed open the door to Abby's store. The bell jangled overhead. Abby looked up from behind the counter. That was fast, she said. I need a favor. Name it. I've got to ride to Cheyenne. I need someone to keep Grace safe while I'm gone. Abby's eyes narrowed. How long? 3 days there. 3 days back. Maybe longer if the weather turns. A week? Maybe more. Abby was silent. Then she nodded. Bring her here. She can sleep in the back room. I've got a shotgun and I know how to use it. Mercer might come. Let him. Abby's voice went hard. I've been waiting 20 years for an excuse to shoot that man. He so much as looks at that girl wrong, I'll give him both barrels. Eli almost smiled. Thank you, Abby. Don't thank me yet. You're riding into a blizzard for a piece of paper that might not even exist. She leaned forward. What makes you think the territorial office kept the original report? Because Mercer's been acting scared. A man don't act scared unless there's something to be scared of. Eli paused. And if there's nothing in Cheyenne at least, I'll know we tried. And if Mercer catches you on the road, then I reckon we'll have a conversation. Abby shook her head. You Rangers, all the same, too stubborn to know when you're beat. That's why we win. He went back to Doc Prescott's office. Grace was sitting by the stove, a cup of tea in her hands. She looked up when he came in, her eyes searching his face. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but I've got to go away for a few days. Her face went pale. No. Listen to me. No. She stood up, the tea sloshing in her cup. You can't leave. You promised. You said you wouldn't leave. I'm not leaving you. Eli crossed to her, knelt down. I'm going to Cheyenne to get proof. Proof that can put Mercer away for good. What kind of proof? The coroner's report from your daddy's accident. The original copy, the one Mercer can't alter. Eli took her hands. If I can prove he murdered your father, none of the rest matters. He goes to prison. You get your inheritance. It's over. Grace's eyes were wet. What if something happens to you? Nothing's going to happen. You don't know that. You're right. I don't. Eli squeezed her hands. But I know that sitting here waiting for Mercer to make his next move isn't going to save either of us. Sometimes you've got to take a risk. I'm scared. So am I. Grace looked at him. Really looked at him like she was seeing something she hadn't seen before. You mean that, she said. I do. You're not just saying it to make me feel better. I don't say things I don't mean. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, When you get back, if you get back, can I call you something? What do you want to call me? She hesitated. Pa. The word hit Eli like a bullet to the chest. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but kneel there in front of this small, fierce girl who'd lost everything and was still brave enough to ask for more. Yeah, he said finally, his voice rough. Yeah, you can call me that. Grace threw her arms around his neck. Eli held her tight, breathed in the smell of wood smoke and fear and something else, something like hope. I'll be back, he whispered. I promise. Don't break your promise. I won't. He stood, looked at Doc Prescott, who was watching them with wet eyes. Take care of her, Eli said. I will. Eli walked to the door, stopped, turned back one more time. Grace stood by the stove, small and pale in Sarah's coat. She raised one hand in a wave. Eli nodded. Then he walked out into the cold, mounted his horse, and rode toward Cheyenne. Behind him, Bitter Creek fell away into the distance. Ahead, the mountains rose white and treacherous against the gray sky. Somewhere between here and there was the proof he needed. And somewhere behind him, watching from a window in the land office, Judge Cornelius Mercer was already planning his next move. 3 days on the trail broke something loose in Eli. The cold ate through his coat, his gloves, his bones. The horse stumbled twice in snowdrifts deep enough to bury a man standing. And every night when he made camp in whatever shelter he could find, he dreamed of Sarah. Not the sick Sarah, the one who'd wasted away to nothing in his arms. The healthy one. The laughing one. The girl who'd run through the fields chasing butterflies and called him Pa with a voice like sunshine. On the 4th morning, he rode into Cheyenne, half-frozen and desperate. The territorial office was a squat brick building near the train station. Eli tied his horse and walked inside, stamping snow from his boots. A clerk looked up from behind a counter, young and bored, his collar too stiff for his thin neck. "Help you. I need to see the coroner's records from Bitter Creek. October of last year. A man named Samuel Thornton." The clerk's eyebrows rose. "That's a specific request." "It's a specific matter." "You got authorization." Eli pulled out the paper Doc Prescott had written, a formal request for medical records signed and witnessed. The clerk read it slowly, his lips moving. "This'll take time," he said. "We got files going back 20 years. Everything's in boxes." "I'll wait." "Could be hours." "I said I'll wait." The clerk shrugged and disappeared into a back room. Eli stood by the window watching the street. Cheyenne was bigger than Bitter Creek, busier, more alive. People moved with purpose here. They didn't look over their shoulders the way folks did in towns where one man held all the power. 2 hours passed. Then 3. Eli was starting to think the clerk had forgotten him when the door opened and a different man emerged. Older, heavier, with a marshal's badge pinned to his vest. "You Eli Hawkins." Eli turned. "Who's asking?" "Name's Crawford, federal marshal." Crawford's eyes were sharp, assessing. "Got a telegram this morning from Bitter Creek. Judge Mercer says you kidnapped his niece and fled the territory." Eli's hand moved toward his hip before he caught himself. He wasn't wearing a gun, hadn't worn one in 3 years. "That's a lie," he said. "Maybe so, but I've got orders to detain you pending investigation." "From who?" "From the judge himself." Eli felt the trap close around him. Mercer had known he'd come here, known he'd look for proof, and he'd moved first the way powerful men always did. "The girl's not kidnapped," Eli said. "She ran away because Mercer was torturing her. He branded her like cattle, burned his initial right into her shoulder." Crawford's face didn't change. "You got proof of that?" "Doc Prescott in Bitter Creek has photographs, witness statements, the brand's still healing on her back." "And you came all the way here for what?" "The coroner's report from her father's death. The original. I believe Mercer altered the copy he filed in Bitter Creek to cover up a murder." Crawford was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. You understand, I could arrest you right now, throw you in a cell, and let the court sort it out." "You could." Eli held the marshal's gaze. "But you won't." "Why not?" "Because you've been a lawman long enough to know when something stinks, and this whole thing stinks to high heaven." Crawford stared at him. Then slowly his lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. "I knew a ranger named Hawkins once," he said. "Years back. Fort Griffin, maybe. Tough son of a bitch. Never backed down from anything. That was me." "Figured." Crawford turned toward the back room. "Jenkins. You find those files yet?" The clerk's voice came back muffled. "Still looking, sir." Well, look faster. Crawford turned back to Eli. I ain't gonna arrest you, not yet, but I am gonna need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. And if I think you're lying, even once, we're gonna have a problem. Eli told him. He told him about finding Grace in the snow, about the brand, about Mercer coming to his door with papers and threats, about Doc Prescott's examination, Abby's suspicions, the rope that had been cut clean. Crawford listened without interrupting. When Eli finished, the marshal let out a long breath. You know what you're describing, Crawford said. Murder, assault on a minor, forgery, fraud. If even half of what you're saying is true, Mercer's looking at a hangman's noose. I know. And you're willing to stake your life on a little girl's word? I'm willing to stake my life on what I saw. Eli's voice went hard. I saw that brand, Marshal. I saw the scars on her back. I saw the fear in her eyes when she talked about him. That ain't something you fake. The door to the back room opened. Jenkins emerged carrying a dusty file box. Found it, he said. October records from Bitter Creek. There's 3 deaths listed, Samuel Thornton, Mary Blackwood, and an unnamed drifter. Crawford took the box, opened it, pulled out a sheaf of papers, and spread them on the counter. Samuel Thornton, he read aloud. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head and chest consistent with crushing injury. Circumstances, accident involving windmill collapse. He paused. Notes from examining physician wound pattern suggest victim was struck from behind before windmill fell. Recommend further investigation. Eli's heart stopped. What did you say? Crawford looked up. It's right here. The original examiner recommended further investigation. Said the wounds didn't match a simple accident. That's not in the report Mercer filed. No. Crawford's voice had gone cold. It's not. He set the paper down, pulled out another document, a second coroner's report, this one with different handwriting. This is the amended report, Crawford said. Filed 2 weeks after the original. Says the first examiner made errors in his assessment. Wounds now listed as consistent with accidental death. No further investigation recommended. He looked at Eli. Signed by Judge Cornelius Mercer. He changed it. He did more than change it. He buried the original and filed a forgery. Crawford's jaw tightened. That's tampering with official records. That's obstruction of justice. And if the first report's right about Thornton being struck from behind, it's murder. The word hung in the air between them. Crawford gathered up the papers. I'm coming with you. To Bitter Creek. Damn right. This ain't just about a little girl anymore. This is about a federal judge corrupting the entire territorial justice system. He pulled on his coat. I've got men I can wire ahead. Have them meet us on the road. Mercer ain't gonna buy his way out of this one. They rode out within the hour. Crawford brought 2 deputies, hard-faced men who didn't ask questions. They pushed through the snow at a pace that left Eli's horse lathered and gasping. Every mile felt like a countdown. Every hour, Eli wondered what was happening back in Bitter Creek. Was Grace safe? Was Abby still standing guard? Had Mercer made his move? On the second night, they made camp in a ravine sheltered from the wind. Eli couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire staring into the flames, thinking about Sarah, about Mary, about all the people he'd failed to save. Crawford sat down beside him. You know this might not end the way you want, the marshal said. What do you mean? Even with the original report, even with proof of tampering, Mercer's got friends. Powerful friends. Money can buy a lot of silence. Then we make enough noise that silence ain't an option. Crawford nodded slowly. That girl, Grace, she really asked to call you Pa. Eli didn't answer for a long moment. Then he said, She's got nobody else. Neither do you. Eli looked at the marshal. Crawford's face was weathered, worn, but his eyes held something that might have been understanding. I had a family once, Eli said. Lost them to fever. After that, I stopped caring about much of anything. Just worked my land and waited to die. And now I've got something to live for." Crawford was quiet. Then he stood brushing snow from his coat. "Get some sleep, Hawkins. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Eli tried. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Grace's face. That small, fierce girl with her father's will clutched to her chest and a monster's brand on her shoulder. "Hold on," he thought. "I'm coming." They reached Bitter Creek on the afternoon of the 6th day. Something was wrong. Eli felt it before he saw it, a tension in the air, a wrongness that prickled along his spine. The streets were empty. The shops were closed. The church bell was silent. "Where is everyone?" one of Crawford's deputies muttered. Eli spurred his horse forward. Abby's general store was dark. The door hung open, swinging slightly in the wind. Eli dismounted and ran inside. "Abby." No answer. The store was empty. Shelves were knocked over, goods scattered across the floor. There'd been a struggle here, a fight. Eli's blood went cold. "Grace." He ran to the back room. The door was splintered, kicked in from outside. The bed was overturned. Sarah's coat lay crumpled in the corner, torn and stained with blood. But no Grace, no body. "Hawkins!" Crawford's voice came from outside. Eli stumbled back through the store, his heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Crawford stood in the street, pointing toward the church. "They're up there, the whole town." Eli looked. The church doors were thrown wide open. People were filing out, their faces stunned, some of them crying. And at the top of the steps, standing with his hands behind his back like he owned the world, Mercer. Eli walked toward him. Every step felt like a mile. Every breath felt like fire in his lungs. The crowd parted to let him through, and he heard whispers. His name, Grace's name, words like kidnapper and thief and murderer. Mercer watched him come. That smooth, reasonable smile was back on his face. "Eli Hawkins," Mercer said. "You're a hard man to track down." "Where is she?" "The girl." Mercer's smile widened. "She's safe. Back where she belongs. Under my care, as the law requires." "You son of a—" "Careful." Mercer raised one hand. "There are witnesses. Dozens of them. And they've all just heard testimony about how you abducted a disturbed child and fled the territory. How you assaulted a federal marshal in Cheyenne. How you're wanted for questioning in connection with several outstanding warrants." "That's a lie." "Is it?" Mercer's eyes glittered. "Who do you think they're going to believe, Eli, a respected judge, or a broken-down rancher who lost his family and his mind?" Crawford stepped forward, his badge gleaming. "Judge Mercer, I'm Federal Marshal Crawford out of Cheyenne. I've got some questions for you." Mercer's smile flickered, just for an instant. Then it was back. "Marshal, what brings you to our little town?" "These." Crawford held up the papers from the territorial office. "Original coroner's report from Samuel Thornton's death, the one you tried to bury." The crowd went silent. "I don't know what you're talking about," Mercer said. "I think you do." Crawford climbed the steps, his boots loud on the wooden boards. "This report says Thornton was struck from behind before the windmill fell. It recommends investigation, but the report you filed says it was an accident. No investigation needed." He stopped one step below Mercer. "You want to explain how the same death got two different stories? A clerical error, a forgery." Crawford's voice cracked like a whip. "With your signature on it, that's tampering with federal records, Judge. That's obstruction of justice. And if that first report is right, it's murder." Grace's voice came from inside the church. Everyone turned. She stood in the doorway, small and pale, her dress torn and her face bruised. But her eyes, those eyes were burning. "He killed my daddy," she said. "I saw it. I was in the barn when he cut the rope. I watched my daddy die, and then he took me home and branded me like I was his cattle." She pulled down the collar of her dress. The brand was ugly in the afternoon light. Raw and red, the letter M burned deep into her flesh. Women in the crowd gasped. Men cursed under their breath. Mercer's face had gone white. "She's lying," he said. "She's a disturbed child. She doesn't know what she's saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Grace walked forward, each step slow and deliberate. "You locked me in the root cellar. You whipped me when I cried. You told me I was your property, same as your cattle, and nobody would ever believe me if I told." She stopped at the bottom of the steps, looking up at him. "You were wrong," she said. "They believe me now." The crowd began to murmur. Eli saw faces changing, doubt turning to anger. Anger turning to something harder. These people had trusted Mercer. They'd let him run their town, their courts, their lives, and now they were seeing what that trust had bought them. Jonas Whitmore, the blacksmith, stepped forward. "I got questions," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. About some loans that didn't add up, about some land sales that went through too fast, about how a man who preaches charity every Sunday can brand a child like livestock. "I can explain?" "Then explain." Whitmore crossed his arms. "We're listening." Mercer looked at the crowd, at the faces that had always nodded along with whatever he said, at the people who'd owed him money, who'd feared his power, who'd looked the other way when things didn't seem right. They weren't looking away anymore. "This is absurd," Mercer said. His voice had lost its smoothness. "I'm a judge. I've served this community for 15 years. You're going to believe a traumatized child and a wanted criminal over me." "I believe my own eyes," Doc Prescott said. He'd emerged from the crowd carrying his medical bag. "I've got photographs of what you did to that girl. Measurements, documentation. That brand is your initial Mercer, your mark on a child's flesh. And I believe the evidence," Crawford added. He held up the papers again. "The territorial office keeps records, real records, the kind that don't get altered to suit one man's convenience." Mercer's face twisted. The mask was crumbling now, and underneath was something ugly, something desperate. "You don't understand," he said. "I had debts. The bank examiner was coming. I needed that inheritance to cover—" He stopped. Too late. The crowd had heard enough. "You killed Samuel Thornton for money," Abby Foster said. She'd appeared from somewhere, her arm in a sling, but her voice strong. "You tortured his daughter for money. And you would have killed her too, wouldn't you? Before she turned 12, before she could claim what was hers." Mercer didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Crawford took the handcuffs from his belt. "Judge Cornelius Mercer, you're under arrest for murder assault on a minor tampering with federal records and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say." "No." Mercer's hand moved faster than Eli expected from a man his age. He grabbed Grace, pulled her in front of him like a shield, and pressed something cold against her throat. A knife. Small, sharp, glittering. "Stay back," Mercer hissed. "All of you. Stay back or I'll kill her." The crowd froze. Grace didn't make a sound. She stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on Eli. "Judge," Crawford said carefully, "you don't want to do this. Don't tell me what I want." Mercer's voice had gone high, desperate. "I want what's mine. I want what I earned. 15 years I've run this town. 15 years I've kept the peace. And now you're going to take it all away because of some lying little— Let her go, Mercer." Eli's voice was quiet, calm. The voice of a man who'd faced death before and wasn't afraid of it anymore. "You want a hostage? Take me. I'm worth more to you alive than she is." Mercer laughed a wild, broken sound. You're nothing. A broken-down rancher with no money and no power. She's worth $15,000. She's worth more than that. Eli took a step forward. She's worth everything I have. Everything I am. You want to hurt someone? Hurt me. Pa, don't. Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "It's all right," Eli said. He kept his eyes on Mercer. "It's going to be all right." Mercer's hand trembled. The knife pressed harder against Grace's throat. "You think I won't do it," Mercer said. "You think I've got something to lose? I'm already dead. The bank examiner comes, I'm finished. The trial happens, I hang. So tell me, why shouldn't I take her with me?" Eli stopped, 3 feet away, close enough to see the sweat on Mercer's brow, close enough to see the madness in his eyes. "Because you're not a murderer," Eli said. Mercer laughed again. "I killed Samuel Thornton. I've already got blood on my hands." "You killed a man for money. That's different than killing a child in front of 50 witnesses." Eli held Mercer's gaze. "You do this, you don't just die. You become a monster. The kind of monster that folks tell stories about to scare their children. Is that how you want to be remembered?" Mercer's hand wavered. "Let her go," Eli said. "Face the trial. At least then you die with some dignity." For a long moment nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then slowly Mercer lowered the knife. Grace broke free and ran. Eli caught her, wrapped his arms around her, held her tight, while Crawford and his deputies swarmed Mercer. The crowd surged forward, voices rising, people shouting questions and accusations and prayers. But Eli didn't hear any of it. He just held Grace while she sobbed into his chest. Held her and whispered the only words that mattered. "I've got you. You're safe. I've got you." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "You came back," she said. "You promised. And you came back." "Always," Eli said. "Always." Around them, the town of Bitter Creek was waking up to the truth about the man who'd ruled them for 15 years. Waking up to their own silence, their own complicity, their own failure to see what was right in front of them. But that was for later. Right now, there was only this: a father and daughter standing together in the ruins of a monster's kingdom. And that was enough. They locked Mercer in the jail that same night. Crawford posted 2 deputies outside the cell, and Eli stayed at Abby's store with Grace, neither of them able to sleep. Every sound made Grace flinch. Every creak of the floorboards sent her reaching for Eli's hand. "He's not coming," Eli said for the 10th time. "He's locked up. He can't hurt you anymore." "I know." Grace's voice was small. "But I keep seeing his face. The way he looked when he grabbed me. Like I wasn't even human." Eli pulled her closer. "You're human. You're the most human person I know." "What does that mean?" "It means you've been through hell, and you're still here, still fighting, still caring about other people." He tipped her chin up. "That takes more strength than most folks ever find in their whole lives." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What happens now?" "Trial. Crawford's wiring for a circuit judge from Helena. Should be here in a week. And then Mercer answers for what he did. To your daddy, to you, to everyone he ever hurt." "Will I have to testify?" Eli hesitated. "Probably." "In front of everyone?" "Yes." Grace's hand tightened on his. "I'm scared." "I know you are. But you won't be alone. I'll be right there with you. Abby, Doc Prescott, everyone who stood up for you today." "What if they don't believe me?" "They already believe you. You saw their faces when you showed them the brand. You saw how they looked at Mercer." Eli squeezed her hand. "The hard part's over. Now you just have to tell the truth." "The truth?" Grace laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is, my uncle killed my daddy and tortured me for months. The truth is, nobody helped me until you came along. The truth is, this town let it happen. Some of them did, not all. Enough of them." Eli couldn't argue with that. He'd seen the same thing. She had the people who'd looked away, who'd nodded along with Mercer's lies, who'd convinced themselves that a respected judge couldn't possibly be a monster. "People make mistakes," he said finally. They get scared. They convince themselves that bad things only happen to people who deserve them. It's easier than admitting the world's not fair. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. He looked at her. But it's human. And if you spend your whole life being angry at people for being human, you'll never have room for anything else. Grace was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Is that what happened to you? After Sarah died?" The name still hurt. Eli didn't think it would ever stop hurting. "Yeah," he said. "I was angry for a long time. Angry at God. Angry at the world. Angry at myself for not being able to save her." "What changed?" "You." He smiled, tired but real. "You showed up half dead at my fence line and asked if you were real. And I realized I'd been asking myself the same question for 3 years. What's the answer? We're real when someone else sees us, when someone else cares whether we live or die." He touched her cheek. "You made me real again, Grace, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that." Grace's eyes filled with tears. She threw her arms around him and held on tight. They stayed like that until morning. The circuit judge arrived 6 days later. His name was Harrison Wells, and he was everything Mercer wasn't: plain-spoken, plainly dressed, with eyes that saw straight through pretense. He'd ridden over 200 miles through the worst weather February could offer, and he looked like it hadn't bothered him at all. Crawford met him at the edge of town. "Judge Wells, thank you for coming." "Marshal." Wells dismounted and stretched his back. "I read your telegraph, didn't believe half of it. Then I read the documents you sent." His face went hard. "If what that little girl says is true, Mercer's going to hang." "It's true," Eli said. He'd been waiting with Crawford. "Every word." Wells looked at him. "You're Hawkins, the one who found her." "Yes, sir." "And you're willing to testify?" "I'll do whatever it takes." Wells nodded slowly. "Good. Because this is going to be ugly. Mercer's got friends in Helena, people who owe him favors. They're already making noise about jurisdiction, about procedure, about whether a territorial court has the authority to try a sitting judge." "Does it?" "It does if I say it does." Wells's jaw tightened. "I've been on the bench for 20 years, Hawkins. I've seen corruption before. I've seen powerful men twist the law to suit themselves. But I've never seen anything like this." He paused. "A child. He branded a child." "Yes, sir." "Then let's make sure he pays for it." The trial started 3 days later. They held it in the church, the only building big enough to hold everyone who wanted to watch. People came from ranches 30 miles away. They filled the pews and lined the walls and spilled out onto the steps, straining to hear through the open windows. Mercer sat at the front, his hands shackled, his face blank. He'd aged 10 years in the week since his arrest. The smooth, reasonable mask was gone, and what remained was hollow. Empty. Judge Wells took his seat behind the pulpit. "This court is now in session. The Territory of Wyoming versus Cornelius Mercer on charges of murder in the first-degree assault on a minor, tampering with federal records, and fraud." He looked at Mercer. "How does the defendant plead?" Mercer's lawyer, a nervous young man from Helena, stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Wells banged his gavel. "The prosecution may call its first witness." Crawford stood. "The Territory calls Dr. Henry Prescott." Doc Prescott walked to the witness stand, his medical bag in hand. He was sworn in and took his seat. "Dr. Prescott," Crawford began, "you examined Grace Thornton on February 12th of this year. Can you describe what you found?" Prescott opened his bag and pulled out a photograph. "I found evidence of sustained physical abuse over a period of several months. Multiple healed fractures consistent with blunt force trauma. Scarring on the back consistent with repeated whipping. And this." He held up the photograph. The brand was clear in the image, the letter M burned into Grace's shoulder blade. Gasps echoed through the church. Someone in the back began to cry. In your professional opinion, Crawford continued, could these injuries have been self-inflicted? Absolutely not. The brand alone would have required another person to apply. The positioning on the shoulder blade makes self-infliction impossible. And the other injuries, consistent with regular sustained abuse. This child was beaten repeatedly over a period of months. Mercer's lawyer stood. Objection. The witness is speculating about the source of these injuries. I'm speculating based on 20 years of medical experience, Prescott shot back. I was a field surgeon and the war counselor. I know what violence looks like. Wells leaned forward. Objection overruled. Continue, Marshal. Crawford nodded. Doctor, you also examined the body of Samuel Thornton after his death in October. Can you describe your findings? Prescott's face went grim. I found injuries inconsistent with the official cause of death. The wound pattern suggested Mr. Thornton was struck from behind before the windmill collapsed on him. I noted this in my original report and recommended further investigation. And what happened to that recommendation? It was ignored. 2 weeks later, an amended report was filed stating the death was accidental. The amended report was signed by Judge Mercer. Did you sign the amended report? No, sir, I did not. So the signature on the amended report is a forgery. The crowd erupted. Wells banged his gavel 3 times before order was restored. The prosecution calls its next witness, Grace Thornton. Eli felt Grace's hand tighten on his. She was trembling, her face pale. You don't have to do this, he whispered. Yes, I do. She stood, walked to the witness stand, sat down with her hands folded in her lap. She looked so small up there, so young. But her eyes were steady. Crawford approached her gently. Grace, can you tell the court what happened on the day your father died? Grace took a breath. I was in the barn, hiding. I used to hide there when Uncle Cornelius came to visit because he scared me. Why did he scare you? The way he looked at me, like I was something he wanted to own. She paused. That day I heard voices. My daddy and Uncle Cornelius. They were arguing. What were they arguing about? The ranch. Uncle Cornelius wanted Daddy to sell it to him. Daddy said no. He said the ranch was for me, that it was my inheritance. What happened then? Grace's voice dropped. I heard my daddy yell. Then I heard a crash. I ran to the barn door and looked out. The windmill had fallen. Daddy was underneath it. And where was Judge Mercer? Standing over him, watching. Grace's hands clenched in her lap. He didn't call for help. He just watched my daddy die. Then he walked to the barn and started looking for something. For what? The will. Daddy's will. It says I inherit everything when I turn 12. Uncle Cornelius knew if the will disappeared, he'd get the ranch instead of me. Did he find it? No, I'd already hidden it. In the oilskin pouch my daddy gave me. Grace looked at Eli. I kept it with me every day since. It was the only proof I had that I existed. The church had gone completely silent. Even the people outside had stopped talking. Crawford continued. Grace, after your father died, what happened to you? Uncle Cornelius took me to live with him. He said he was my guardian now, that I belonged to him. How did he treat you? Grace's chin trembled, but she didn't look away. He locked me in the root cellar when he was angry, sometimes for days. He beat me when I cried. He told me I was worthless, that nobody would ever believe me if I told. And the brand? Grace reached up and pulled down the collar of her dress. The brand was still healing red and angry against her pale skin. He did this to me the night before I ran away. He said I needed to learn who I belonged to, that I was his property now, same as his cattle. A woman in the crowd sobbed. Jonas Whitmore stood up, his face red with rage, and had to be pulled back down by the men beside him. One more question, Crawford said. Grace, do you see the man who did these things to you in this courtroom? Grace looked at Mercer. For a long moment, they stared at each other. The man who had tortured her. The child who had survived. Yes, Grace said. "He's sitting right there." She pointed at Mercer. "Let the record show," Wells said, "that the witness has identified the defendant." Mercer's lawyer stood for cross-examination. He was sweating his collar dark with moisture. "Miss Thornton," he began, "you claim you saw Judge Mercer at the scene of your father's death, but you were hiding in the barn, correct? How could you see clearly from inside a barn? There were gaps in the wood. I could see through them." "Gaps in the wood. So you were looking through small holes at a scene some distance away. Isn't it possible you misidentified what you saw?" "No." "How can you be certain?" "Because I saw his face." Grace's voice hardened. "I saw him standing over my daddy. I saw him smile." The lawyer faltered. "Miss Thornton, you've been through a traumatic experience. Isn't it possible that your memory has been affected?" "My memory is fine." Grace cut him off. "I remember everything. Every night he locked me in that cellar. Every time he hit me. Every word he said when he burned me with that iron." She stood up from the witness chair. "You want to know what he said? He said I should be grateful. He said he was teaching me my place. He said by the time he was done with me, I'd forget I'd ever had a father." Her voice broke. "But I didn't forget. I never forgot. And I never will." The church was absolutely silent. Mercer's lawyer sat down. He didn't have any more questions. Wells called a recess. People filed out slowly, talking in low voices, shaking their heads. Eli pushed through the crowd to reach Grace. She was standing by the witness chair, her whole body shaking. "You did good," he said. "You did so good." "I couldn't stop." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Once I started talking, I couldn't stop." "You didn't have to stop. You told the truth. That's all anyone can ask." Grace looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but something in them had changed. Something hard had finally broken loose. "It felt good," she said, saying it out loud, making people hear. "That's what truth does. It sets you free." She almost smiled. "Pa, yeah. Thank you for believing me." Eli pulled her into his arms. "Always." The trial resumed an hour later. Crawford called witness after witness. Abby Foster testified about the ledgers she'd seen, the debts that didn't add up, the telegrams Mercer had burned. Marshall Bridger testified about the evidence he'd gathered, the forged documents, the original coroner's report that proved Samuel Thornton's death was murder. By the time the sun set, the case against Mercer was overwhelming. Wells announced the jury would deliberate overnight. Eli took Grace back to Abby's store. They ate a quiet dinner stew that Abby had made bread that was still warm from the oven. Grace didn't eat much, but she didn't push the food away either. "What happens if they find him not guilty?" she asked. "They won't." "But what if they do?" Eli set down his spoon. "Then we appeal. We take it to the Territorial Supreme Court. We keep fighting until someone listens. And if nobody listens, then we leave. Go somewhere Mercer can't touch us. Start over." Grace was quiet. Then she said, "I don't want to run anymore." "Neither do I. I want to stay here, on my daddy's land, in the place where I was born." "Then that's what we'll do." "You promise?" Eli reached across the table and took her hand. "I promise." They went to bed early, but neither of them slept. Eli lay in the dark, listening to Grace's breathing, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. A blizzard, a blood trail in the snow, a child who'd asked if she was real. He'd spent 3 years waiting to die. Now he had something to live for. The verdict came at noon the next day. The church was packed tighter than before. People stood on benches to see over the crowd. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Everyone wanted to witness the end. Judge Wells called the court to order. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. He was an older man, a rancher from the far end of the valley, his face weathered by sun and wind. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of murder in the first degree, how do you find guilty?" The crowd erupted. Wells banged his gavel. On the charge of assault on a minor. Guilty. On the charge of tampering with federal records. Guilty. On the charge of fraud. Guilty. The foreman sat down. The crowd was roaring now, people shouting and crying and embracing each other. Grace sat frozen beside Eli, her hand gripping his so tight he could feel her bones. Wells banged his gavel until silence fell. Cornelius Mercer, you have been found guilty on all counts. The sentence for murder in the first degree is death by hanging. The sentence will be carried out 3 days hence at sunrise. He looked at Mercer. May God have mercy on your soul. Mercer didn't react. He sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead, as if he'd already left his body behind. The deputies led him away. Grace watched him go. "It's over," she whispered. "It's over." She turned to Eli. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. Actually smiling for the first time since he'd known her. "We won," she said. "We actually won." "Yeah." Eli pulled her close. "We did." Around them, the town of Bitter Creek celebrated. People laughed and cried and hugged strangers. The church bells began to ring, not the alarm peal of danger, but the joyful sound of victory. But Eli didn't hear any of it. He just held Grace while she cried, held her, and let himself believe for the first time in 3 years that maybe the world wasn't as cruel as he'd thought. Maybe there was still room for second chances. Maybe there was still room for hope. They hanged Mercer at sunrise on a Tuesday. Grace didn't watch. Eli didn't either. They stayed at Abby's store, sitting by the window, listening to the silence that fell over the town when the trapdoor dropped. Then the church bells rang slow and final, and it was done. "Do you feel different?" Eli asked. Grace thought about it. "I thought I would. I thought when he died, something inside me would, I don't know, let go. And it's still there, the anger, the fear." She looked at her hands. "I thought it would disappear when he was gone. It doesn't work like that." Eli sat down across from her. "The hurt doesn't go away just because the person who caused it is dead. You carry it with you. But over time it gets lighter. Easier to hold." "How do you know?" "Because I've been carrying mine for 3 years." He reached out and took her hand. "And it's lighter now than it's ever been." Grace squeezed his fingers. "Because of me. Because of you." They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the town was coming back to life. Footsteps on the boardwalk. Voices calling greetings. The ordinary sounds of people going about their business. The shadow that had hung over Bitter Creek for 15 years was finally gone. Abby came in from the back room carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You two look like you haven't slept in a week," she said. "We haven't," Grace admitted. "Well, that ends tonight." Abby set the cups down. "You're staying here until you're both rested. No arguments." "Abby," Eli started. "I said no arguments." She fixed him with a look that could have melted iron. "You saved this town, Eli Hawkins. The least we can do is give you a decent bed and a hot meal." Eli wanted to protest, but he was tired, bone-tired, soul-tired, and the coffee smelled good, and the chair was comfortable, and Grace was already starting to doze off beside him. "All right," he said. "1 night." 3 nights, Abby countered. "Minimum. 2. 3, or I'm telling Doc Prescott you need bed rest." Eli almost smiled. "You fight dirty. I fight to win. There's a difference." They stayed 3 nights. On the 4th day, Eli hitched his horse to the wagon Abby had lent them and loaded their few belongings. Grace climbed up beside him, wrapped in Sarah's coat, the oilskin pouch tucked safely inside her dress. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Home." "Your ranch?" "Our ranch." He looked at her. "If you want it to be." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said,
What about my daddy's land? The inheritance? That's yours. It'll always be yours. But you don't have to live there if you don't want to. We can figure out what to do with it together. Together. She tested the word like she wasn't sure what it meant. Like a family. Like a family. Her eyes filled with tears. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed, but Eli pretended not to notice. I'd like that, she said finally. I'd like that a lot. They rode out of Bitter Creek under a sky that was finally clearing. The clouds were breaking apart, and patches of blue showed through for the first time in weeks. The snow was starting to melt, leaving the ground soft and muddy. Spring was coming. Eli could feel it in the air, that faint warmth underneath the cold, the smell of earth waking up after a long sleep. He'd almost forgotten what hope felt like. Now it was everywhere. They reached the ranch in the late afternoon. The cabin looked smaller than Eli remembered. Older. The fence needed mending, and the barn door hung crooked on its hinges. But smoke was rising from the chimney. Doc Prescott had been checking on the place while they were gone, and the horses nickered when they heard the wagon approach. "It's not much," Eli said. "It's perfect." He looked at Grace. She was staring at the cabin with wonder in her eyes, like she was seeing a palace instead of a rundown ranch house. "You mean that?" "I've never had a home before. Not really. Not one that was mine." She turned to him. "Is it really ours?" "It's really ours." Grace jumped down from the wagon before he could help her. She ran to the cabin door, threw it open, and stood in the doorway, taking it all in. Eli followed more slowly, his bones aching from days in the saddle. Inside, everything was just as he'd left it. The chair by the fire, the shelf where he kept Martha's McGuffey readers, the corner where Grace had slept that first night, clutching her oilskin pouch like it was the only real thing in the world. Grace walked to the shelf, picked up one of the readers. "Was this Sarah's?" "Yes." "Will you tell me about her? Sometime?" Eli's throat tightened. "I'd like that." Grace put the book back, turned to face him. "Pa?" It still hit him like a punch to the chest hearing her call him that. He didn't think he'd ever get used to it. "Yeah. Thank you for everything, for finding me, for believing me, for not giving up. Thank you for letting me." She smiled a real smile, bright and unguarded, and for a moment she looked like any other 12-year-old girl. Not a survivor, not a victim, just a child with her whole life ahead of her. They spent the next few weeks rebuilding. The fence got mended, the barn door got fixed. Eli taught Grace how to care for the horses, how to check their hooves for stones, how to mix feed in the right proportions. She was a quick learner, fearless around animals in a way she wasn't around people. "You've got a gift," Eli told her one afternoon. They were in the corral working with a young mare that had gone skittish after a coyote scare. "What kind of gift? Horses trust you. They can feel when someone's afraid and when someone's not." He watched her stroke the mare's neck, her touch gentle and sure. "You're not afraid." "I was afraid of everything for a long time," Grace said. "Uncle Cornelius made sure of that. But horses aren't like people. They don't lie. They don't pretend to be something they're not." "Neither do you." She looked at him. "Is that a good thing?" "It's the best thing." He leaned on the fence rail. "The world's full of people who hide what they really are, who smile when they're angry and lie when it's easier than telling the truth. You don't do that. You say what you mean, and you mean what you say." "Pa?" "Yeah, I think you do that too." Eli smiled. "I try." The mare nuzzled Grace's hand, looking for treats. Grace laughed. Actually laughed, a sound Eli had heard only a handful of times, and the joy in it made his heart ache. This was what he'd been missing. This was what 3 years of grief had stolen from him. Not just a daughter. Not just a family. Hope. March turned to April. The snow melted completely, and the first green shoots pushed up through the mud. Eli planted a garden behind the cabin, beans and corn and squash the way his mother had taught him. Grace helped her hands dirty and her face streaked with soil, asking questions about everything. Why do you plant them together? They help each other grow. The corn gives the beans something to climb. The beans put nutrients back in the soil. The squash spreads out and keeps the weeds down. Like a family. Eli looked at her. What do you mean? Different people doing different things but all helping each other. She pressed a seed into the earth. That's what a family is, isn't it? I reckon so. We're a family. It wasn't a question. Eli didn't treat it like one. Yeah, he said. We are. In late April, a letter arrived from the territorial office in Cheyenne. Eli read it twice before he understood what it said. Grace. She was feeding the chickens, scattering grain with practiced efficiency. She looked up at his tone. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He held up the letter. The territorial court has officially voided all of Mercer's legal rulings. Every judgment he made in the last 5 years is being reviewed. What does that mean? It means the guardianship order is void. It means the amended coroner's report is void. He paused. It means you're officially free. Grace went very still. Free. No legal claims against you. No debts. No one who can take you away. Eli walked toward her. You're your own person, Grace. Nobody's property. Nobody's ward. Just you. Her eyes filled with tears. She dropped the bucket of grain and ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. I'm free, she whispered. I'm really free. You're really free. She pulled back, wiping her face with her sleeve. But what about... I mean, if I'm free, then legally, you're not my guardian anymore either. That's true. So what happens to us? Eli knelt down so they were eye to eye. That depends on what you want. What I want? You're free now. You can go anywhere. Do anything. If you want to stay here, you can stay. If you want to go live on your daddy's land, I'll help you set it up. If you want to find some relatives back east, I'll put you on a stagecoach myself. He took her hands. This is your choice, Grace. For the first time in your life, nobody gets to make it for you. She stared at him. Then she said, I want to stay. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She squeezed his hands. You're my family, Pa. The only family I've got. I don't want to be anywhere else. Eli pulled her into a hug. Then you won't be. The second letter arrived in May. This one was from the Territorial Land Office, and it confirmed what Grace had known all along, that Samuel Thornton's will was valid, that Grace was the sole heir to his estate, and that upon her 12th birthday in July, full ownership of the property would transfer to her. 400 acres, 350 head of cattle, water rights to Bitter Creek. Grace read the letter 3 times. That's a lot of land, she said finally. It is. And a lot of cattle. Yep. I don't know how to run a ranch. Neither did I when I started. Eli sat down across from her. But I learned. And you will too if you want to. Do you think I can do it? I think you can do anything you set your mind to. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Will you help me? What do you mean? The ranch. My daddy's ranch. It's too much for one person. She looked at him. But if we combined them, your land and mine, we could make something real, something that would last. Eli's heart stopped. You're asking me to be my partner, my family, my pa. Grace reached across the table and took his hand. I don't want to do this alone. I don't want to be alone ever again. Grace, please. Eli looked at her. This fierce, brave girl who'd crawled through a blizzard with nothing but a piece of paper and a question. Who'd stood up to a monster and told the truth when everyone else looked away. Who'd asked if she was real and then proved it with every breath she took. Yeah, he said. Okay. Partners. Grace's face lit up. Really? Really? She jumped up and hugged him so hard he nearly fell off his chair. He hugged her back, laughing, feeling lighter than he had in years. Partners, she said again like she was trying the word out. I like that. So do I. July came hot and dry. On the morning of Grace's 12th birthday, they rode into Bitter Creek together. The town had changed since February. There was a new sheriff now, a quiet man named Patterson, who'd been a deputy in Laramie. The land office had a new clerk. The church had a new coat of paint. But some things were the same. Abby was still behind the counter at the general store. Doc Prescott was still dispensing medicine and advice in equal measure. Jonas Whitmore was still hammering away at his forge. They all came out when Grace and Eli rode in. Well, well, Abby said. Look who's come to collect her inheritance. Happy birthday, Miss Thornton, Doc Prescott said. He was smiling, really smiling for the first time Eli could remember. Or should I say Miss Landowner? Grace blushed. It doesn't feel real yet. It will. Abby pressed a small package into her hands. From all of us, a birthday present. Grace unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a silver locket on a chain. She opened it and gasped. That's your mother, Abby said quietly. And your father. I found the photograph in Samuel's things after he died. I've been saving it for you. Grace's eyes filled with tears. She stared at the tiny photographs, a young woman with gentle eyes, a man with Grace's stubborn chin, and her whole body trembled. I forgot what they looked like, she whispered. I tried to remember, but I couldn't. Now you don't have to try. Abby put her arm around Grace's shoulders. They're with you, always. Grace clutched the locket to her chest. Thank you. Thank you so much. The paperwork took less than an hour. Judge Wells had come down from Helena specifically for this to witness the transfer of ownership to make sure everything was done right. He shook Grace's hand when it was finished. Miss Thornton, he said, you are now the legal owner of 400 acres of prime Wyoming land. Use it well. I will, Your Honor. And Mr. Hawkins. Wells turned to Eli. The territory owes you a debt. If there's ever anything you need. I've got everything I need, Eli said. He put his hand on Grace's shoulder. Right here. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting. Grace was quiet, the locket around her neck, the deed to her father's land tucked safely in her saddlebag. What are you thinking? Eli asked. About my daddy. She looked at the horizon. I wish he could see this. I wish he could know that we won, that his land is safe, that everything he worked for didn't disappear. He knows. You think so? I think the people we love don't really leave us. They stay here. Eli touched his chest. In our hearts, in the choices we make, in the way we treat other people. Grace considered that. Sarah's still with you. Every day. And my daddy's still with me. Every day. They rode in silence for a while. The ranch came into view as the last light faded the cabin, the corral, the garden they'd planted together. Pa, Grace said. Yeah. I want to do something, tomorrow morning, something important. What is it? The branding iron. The one Mercer used. She touched her shoulder where the M was still visible beneath her dress. The deputies took it as evidence, but they gave it back to me after the trial. It's been in Abby's store ever since. What do you want to do with it? Destroy it. Her voice was steady. Melt it down. Make sure nobody ever uses it again. Eli nodded slowly. I think that's a fine idea. Will you help me? I'll be right there beside you. Grace smiled. Partners. Partners. They burned the branding iron the next morning. Jonas Whitmore let them use his forge. The whole town gathered to watch Abby and Doc Prescott, the new sheriff, the ranchers and shopkeepers, and ordinary folks who'd stood up when it mattered.
Grace held the iron in her hands. It was cold now, just metal, but she could still feel what it represented. Pain, fear, ownership, everything Mercer had tried to make her believe about herself. "You're sure?" Eli asked. "I'm sure." She thrust the iron into the forge. The flames roared. The metal began to glow red, then orange, then white. The letter M softened and warped, losing its shape, becoming nothing more than a blob of molten steel. Grace watched it melt. And as it disappeared, she felt something inside her change, not disappear. Eli was right. The hurt never really disappeared, but shift, lighten, become something she could carry instead of something that carried her. "It's done," she said. "It's done." She turned to Eli. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "I'm free now. Really free." "You were always free," Eli said. "You just didn't know it yet." They stood together watching the last of the iron melt away. Around them, the people of Bitter Creek began to drift off back to their lives, their work, their ordinary problems. But Grace and Eli stayed. They stayed until the fire burned down, until the forge went cold, until the sun was high in the sky and the morning was gone. Then they rode home. 3 years later. Grace stood on the porch of the house they'd built together, bigger now, with a room for her and a room for Eli and a proper kitchen with a real stove. The garden had expanded too, spreading across the south side of the property in neat rows of vegetables and flowers. She was 15 now, tall, strong. Her hair had grown long, and she wore it braided down her back the way her mother had in the photograph. The brand on her shoulder had faded to a thin white scar, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Eli came out of the barn wiping his hands on his pants. "That new mare's gonna be trouble," he said. "She just needs patience. She needs a firm hand." "Same thing." Grace smiled. "You taught me that." Eli climbed the porch steps and stood beside her, looking out over the land they'd built together. His land and hers combined now nearly 700 acres of ranch and grazing rights. "Your daddy would be proud," he said. So would Sarah. Eli's throat tightened. Even after all this time, the name still hurt. But it was a different kind of hurt now, softer, gentler, wrapped up in memory instead of grief. "You think so? I know so." Grace leaned against his shoulder. "She'd be glad you didn't give up. Glad you found someone to love again." "I didn't find you," Eli said. "You found me." "Same thing." They stood together in the afternoon light, watching the horses graze in the pasture. Somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang. "Pa," Grace said. "Yeah. Thank you for everything. Thank you for asking if you were real." Grace laughed. That was a strange thing to ask a stranger. It was the truest thing I'd heard in years. Eli put his arm around her shoulders. "You made me real again, Grace. You gave me a reason to keep going. I don't know where I'd be without you." "You'd be here," Grace said. "Alone, waiting for something to change. And now you've got me." She grinned up at him. "And you're stuck with me forever." "I can live with that." "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." The meadowlark sang again. The wind moved through the grass, warm and sweet with the promise of summer. And Eli Hawkins, who had lost everything and found something better, held his daughter close and let himself believe in tomorrow. Family wasn't blood. Family wasn't a name on a piece of paper. Family was who you'd walk through a blizzard for, who you'd fight for, who you'd die for. And Eli would walk through 1,000 blizzards for Grace. He already had.